Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shanno Mitra Sham Varunaha Shanno Bhavatvaryama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnururukhramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Rudam vadishyami, satyam vadishyami, tadmamavatu, tadvaktaramavatu, avatu mam, avatu vaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. What we did last time, if you all remember, after yesterday's whole day off, okay, that so kamayata. So there was this whole understanding of how did Brahman, without undergoing any change, becomes all this. So there is an intervening factor. Okay? So that intervening factor is all knowledge. Okay? Now, there is a big analysis about this. I would like to, in the Bhashyam, in Adi Shankaracharya Bhashyam, I would like to give you a glimpse of it. There are a series of arguments. So, I'll tell you what they are in brief, but comprehensive. Right? Now, first he starts by saying that up to now, when Brahman was talked about, it was talked from the standpoint of its own nature. So that is Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma is the nature of Brahman. So this is what we call Swarupa Lakshana. Swarupa is, this is the nature. Right? What is Brahman? It is existence, it is consciousness, it is limitless. Okay? Now, Brahman is talked about from the standpoint of the creation. Okay? So I see the creation, I want to know the cause of this creation. So this is what we call Tatastha Lakshana. Tatastha Lakshana means, if I first give you the example between Swarupa and Tatastha Lakshana, then we'll see how it applies here. When somebody asks what is the Akasha, the space, and if I give the definition that Avakasha Pradatru is Akasha, that which accommodates everything is Akasha. Let's say that is a definition. That is a direct, that definition directly explains what space is. But if there are many trees here and I want to point out one tree to you, okay, and on that tree, if there is a crow sitting there, then you will say, which tree do you mean? And if I point out the crow, I say that the tree on which the crow is. Okay? Does the crow have anything to do with the tree? It has got nothing to do with the tree, but it serves the function of indicating the tree that I intend to convey to you. This is what we call Tatastha Lakshana. Okay? How does it apply to Brahman? Okay? It applies to Brahman because in terms of its own nature, it is Satyam Jnanam Anantam. It has never become the creator at all. There is no creation. Brahman has never undergone any change in the first place. Okay? So any question which arises from the standpoint of taking the creation as reality cannot be answered and need not be answered. Because the contention is that Brahman has never undergone any change in the first place. Okay? But you do see the world. Nobody can deny seeing the world. So from the standpoint of the world, you have to say what is the cause. And that cause, with standpoint of the whole creation, you can say it is all knowledge. It must have the knowledge to create whatever there is. Okay? In order to come back, our own personal example of a dream. Okay? From my own standpoint, there is no creation at all. Nothing that I have created in my dream world, the mountain, river, characters, any feelings that happen in the dream, in fact, there is no real creation at all. Right? I have never undergone any change as such. I have not become the mountain, I have not become the river, I have not become the characters, I am not touched by any of the feelings that are taking place in the dream. Okay? So I am totally free. Okay? But if somebody is talking from the standpoint of the dream, who's the creator? I am the creator. But from my own standpoint, there is the entire creation is only as though I have never actually created anything. So there are two standpoints. My own standpoint, and then from the standpoint of what I see, there is this intervening factor which is the cause. So now Brahman is seen as from the standpoint of the intervening cause. And what is the prakriya used? What is the methodology used to show you, to take you to this Brahman from what you see? The methodology that is used is what we call Karya Karana Prakriya. Karya is the cause and effect is what we call Karya. Karana is the cause and Karya is the effect. Okay? So you see the effect, you see the world. Now, from seeing the effect, you are taken to the cause. Okay? This is very important because Bhashyakara raises another objection. He says, if from the effect you arrive at the cause, then it is your anumana, it is your inference. So where is Shastra as a pramana? You see, you are seeing the effect and you are presupposing that there is a cause. So then what is the use of Shastra here at all? Can it not fall within our normal perception-based inference? Then he says, no. Why can it not fall within our normal pramana usage of perception and inference? Because as we have seen, in order for inference to work, you must have what we call the invariable concomitance. Okay? Every time there is a smoke, there has to be fire. You cannot have, in order for that inference to work, you must have invariable concomitance. Every time there is smoke, there has to be a fire, otherwise your inference will not work. Okay? So in this case, of inferring the presence of the cause because of seeing the effect, okay, then you can have several possibilities, he says. The possibility can be that there is one cause for everything, or there are multiple causes. Right? So just through inference, you cannot establish one of the two. You give me one example where there is only one cause. In this case, for example, there is a simple thing called the pot, okay? And you can have only one person who created the pot. But you can have a complex creation which is a watch, and you have number of people creating this effect. So just through inference, you don't know if it is one thing which is the cause or multiple things which are the cause. Okay? Therefore, you cannot establish whether just the presence of Ishvara in terms of just using the logic, because there are several possibilities. Of all these possibilities, which one is the right one? That you have no way to establish. Now let us take one possibility. The one possibility, then he says, okay, so now let us assume that the presence of Ishvara, Karya Karana is a prakriya to take you to understand what is Ishvara, but what is that nature of Ishvara can only be known through Shastra, it cannot be arrived at through logic. Right? Then let's come back to Shastra and see what it says about the cause of the universe. It says, Sa Akamayata. Okay, he desired. So here he again asks this question, look at the rigorous thinking, the analysis that goes into establishing what is said by Shastra. Right? So somebody asks this question, says that why can't I just take like one person desired? Right? Why can't we take God as an entity which desired and created the whole world? That is the literal meaning. In which case the God becomes one person which is outside and then desired. Just like us, but little bigger entity. That particular way of looking at things will have number of problems. Okay? There are several logical problems, and there are certain things which are contradicted by what is said in the Shastra. We will see them. Okay? Now, if I postulate the cause of the universe as sitting in one place, the first logical impossibility comes by what I had said, that where did the material come from? Okay? So the creation is yet to come. If the material already exists, then there is somebody else who is the creator of that material, using which this creator creates the universe. Then that person ceases to be all knowledge and all capacity. Okay? Logically, it is not possible. Second way of looking at it is, you can ask this question, so if there is an entity called God, where is this God? Then you have to attribute a place which is not a local place, because you don't see locally any God. So you have to attribute a place called heaven. Okay? Then I can ask you one more question, and if I can, I ask you, so where is this heaven? Is this heaven within time and place? If there is an entity sitting in some place, it becomes a place within time and space framework. But the creation is yet to come. So there is no place as such before the coming of the creation. So that is the second logical impossibility. The third thing is that let us suppose that God sitting in heaven created the universe. Then I can ask the question, so who created the heaven? then you have to say God created the heaven, because there is no other entity. Then I can ask one more question: where was God before He created the heaven? Okay. Logically, everything falls apart at every level. Therefore, you cannot use this so kamayata, neither you can arrive at through your inference. Look at the rigor, right? Neither you can arrive at through your inference that there is God and what is the nature of God. And if you take some things literally, your concepts literally, they logically fall apart. So therefore you have to come to an answer which cannot be contradicted by logic. And the only possibility is that God is in form of this all-knowledge, which is not only the efficient cause, the maker, but also the material cause of the creation. That means God is everywhere. And this is what the Shruti says later when you say Tat Sruštva Tadeva Anupravishata. Having created, it entered. That entering means what? That the presence of God or the presence of knowledge is all that is here. And only then the whole what is said in the Upanishads in the beginning, here, and what is said later will all match. Otherwise there will be an internal contradiction. In order for there to be a pramana, you must meet two conditions. What Upanishads say in the beginning and what it says later cannot contradict what it says in the middle. If there is an internal contradiction within the text, it is not a coherent text. The second important thing is, it cannot also contradict what I see in the logically. Because you can have a system which is internally very perfectly placed, there is no internal contradiction, okay? But the very assumption that Neeram was asking this question, is it a model which has some assumptions? If those assumptions themselves are wrong, even though you have a perfectly matching thing, your thing doesn't work. Okay? So it also has to correspond to the reality. So here Bhashyakara says, this is what we call Mimamsa. Mimamsa of Shastra means the whole analysis of what Shastra is saying. Okay? And then there is what we call Samanvaya. Samanvaya means ensuring that there is no internal contradiction in what is said. On one place you cannot say Brahman is limitless, that created the whole world. Then you construe one person sitting out there creating, it all doesn't match. Neither it matches internally in terms of logic, nor it matches in terms of just applying logic to see how things are. Okay. The second important thing is that being a pramana, it reveals, it shows you, right? It shows you how the presence of all knowledge which you have been missing is so true. Okay. That day in the evening when Dustin was showing some things where scientists are working very hard to reconcile and to explain. So Neera said, yeah, but it's already done from the standpoint of all knowledge, because that's why they are there. Right? The contradictions which exist or reconciliation which is needed with reference to a human mind is already solved from the standpoint of what is. It's already solved because this is how things are. There is a kind of a quantum universe and there is a kind of a macro universe which behave sometimes differently, but they are reconciled in a way that the world is what it is. Okay? So the presence of all knowledge is something which you just have to use the pramana and see how true it is. Okay? We think that the pramana, okay, this means of knowledge is abstract. In fact, all our ideas of who we are, what is the nature of the cause are very vague. It makes them far more concrete based on a very tight and rigorous analysis. So it should seem like far more concrete than abstract. But why does it appear to be much more abstract? Because it questions our existing framework with which we look at the universe. So our framework seems like a concrete thing. Okay? And anything that questions that existing framework seems like very vague and very abstract. But actually, what is produced by Shastra is a far more immediate meaning of things, ideas about I, far more rigorously thought of ideas about I, about the cause of the universe, nature of the universe, than what I had, my vague notions which I had, which seemed like very real to me. Okay? So this is how Bhashyakara just takes this word so kamayata and what is the right meaning. You can see how much rigor is there in just analyzing and defending one sentence. Then he says, and then what is the real meaning of so kamayata? Is not that, oh, he desired and he created the universe. That is what through this sentence, what Shruti talks about is between this Brahman, Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, and these five elements, there is an intervening reality which is what we call all knowledge, which has the capacity to manifest. And with reference to that all knowledge, there is what we call, there is an intent. There is an intent, let me become many. Bahusyam praja yeti. So kamayata, there is an intent, and that is Bahusyam praja yeti. Let me manifest as many. Not let me have one creation. Let me manifest as many. Bahusyam praja yeti. Satapo tapyata. How do you indicate that there is a knowledge involved? Tapaha here is said in terms of knowledge. Okay? Tasya jnanaiva tapaha. He quotes in some other Upanishad, because then again the question is, how do you take the meaning of tapasya? So this is where you say that everything has to reconcile. And Brahma Sutra is a marvelous text which shows how what Upanishads say in one Upanishad and the other Upanishad and in one Gita, they all reconcile to give you this vision, and how there is no internal contradiction. Not only there is no internal contradiction in what the Vedas and Upanishads are talking about, but it also doesn't contradict with my experiences. And it leads me to discover something which I cannot arrive at through my experiences of normal experience and using my perception and inference. So when we say things, the amount of analysis, if you have studied Shastra, the amount of analysis which is behind the statements that you make is just incredible. Okay? So tapas has to be seen as all knowledge. And then all knowledge has what? All power. Satapas tattva idam sarvam asrujata, created everything, yadidan kincha, okay, whatever that you see, tat sruštva, having entered that, tat eva anupravishata, that anupravishya srushti is also again analyzed. It says generally one thing enters into the other. Okay. So if you have to take it like that, so if Ishvara is yet to enter the creation, so how did he create the creation? Exactly. So there is no such thing chronological thing. Absolutely simultaneous. You cannot have a chronological entering, because again that it contradicts logic. With what did it create the universe? And after having created that universe, then he entered. That doesn't make sense. So there is a simultaneity there. Ishvara is in the form of the universe, and therefore it has entered everywhere. It is in and through everything. And when you use Shastra, you can see that as a concrete reality. Okay? Then it says what all it includes, that we have already seen: form and formless, defined and undefined, sustaining, non-sustaining, sentient, insentient. So all knowledge and pervades everything. It has the capacity. What happens is that, in fact, if you see in every faith where there is the conception of God, right, they do talk about omniscient and omnipresence. When we say omniscient and omnipotent, what does it mean? Omniscient, if you look at the dictionary meaning, it has the thing of all knowledge. And omnipotent is all capacity. Okay? And still, even if it is the case, we construe that there is one person with all knowledge, sitting away from me. Very simple logic. If my knowledge is separate from there, then that person is not all knowledge. No matter how little tiny knowledge that I have, if that entity is separate from me, that entity is limited in its knowledge, and your knowledge is separate from there, your knowledge is separate from there. You can't call it all knowledge. So any representation of the cause which is other than you, which is away from you, doesn't logically hold at all. That all knowledge means what? It should include everybody's knowledge, but it should be much more than sum total of everybody's knowledge. Okay. All capacity means what? If my capacity is different from his capacity, then that is limited. It has to include all the capacities that everybody has, but much more than sum total of all the capacities that we have. That is the only plausible way of understanding the cause as omniscient and omnipotent. And this is what Vedanta makes you see. It includes my capacity, as Surya keeps on showing in the meditation, that my little capacity of creating the pot, my little capacity of looking into the universe and figuring out what is the nature of the universe, my little capacity to use the sounds in form of beautiful music. It includes all these capacities. But that all knowledge is the one which puts together different human brains and gives those capacities. It is much more than any given capacity, but all capacities are within that all knowledge and all capacity. That is how you have to understand Ishvara. There is no other logical way or plausible way of understanding Ishvara. And by being everything, it is free from everything. So, this is what is said now. Further, if you have to explain what is the nature of that Ishvara, now before that, okay, now you look at the Shruti goes the other way, right? Now let us suppose that there is no cause at all. Here we have said, we have used the logic, Karya Karana Prakriya, every time there is an effect, there must be a cause. Right? And then we have said that that cause can be arrived at through inference, it was negated. then what is the nature of that cause which is arrived at through Shastra? Is it one individual sitting out there? No. Okay? It is all that is here. That is what is intended to be conveyed by Shastra, because this is how it unfolds, and also this is how the reality is. Okay. Now let us postulate that there was no cause at all. So here, all the arguments up to now were Karya Karana Prakriya means there is an effect, so therefore there must be a cause. Now that particular premise is also questioned. Right? Let us suppose that there is no cause. So the next one. Asadva idam agra asita tato vai sadajayata. There are some people who are saying the whole world, which is in form of effect, came from nothing. Asat. Asat means tucham, which does not exist. Right? So everything just came from nothing. Tadatma swayam akuruta tasmat sakrutam uchyata iti yadvai tat sakrutam. Okay? Now let us see what exactly is the logical problem of thinking that there is no cause at all. We have two very important philosophies, okay, which take the final cause as nothing, and both fall within Buddhism. Okay. One is what we call, whether the Buddha said that or not, we don't know, but when Adi Shankaracharya addresses this thing of non-existence of cause, okay, he is talking about two schools of philosophy. One is what we call Shunyavada, and the other one is what we call Kshanikavada. Okay? Shunyavada is that you take the same analysis. Okay? Buddha also talks about Buddhism. We don't know what Buddha taught, we don't know. Right? But at least the way the Buddhism is talking about the reality, it talks about there is an effect, there is the table here, but you cannot find the cause, as we have said. The final cause. So therefore, what do they say? There is no cause. Because you can't find it, then they say there is no cause. It is shunya.
Emptiness.
Emptiness or void. Okay. Now, Bhashyakara, and then there is another school of Buddhism which says there is Kshanika Vijnanavadi. What is a Kshanika Vijnanavadi? It says that everything is nothing but flickers. Okay? The particles are nothing but flickers. Your thoughts are nothing but flickers. Okay? Somehow through some process, they all appear as continuous, right? And very stable, and that fools you. But behind it all these processes which are just at micro level, all just very, very small and minute, there is nothing. That is what we call Kshanikavadi. Okay. Now, Bhashyakara negates them both, and it says anything that you see in this universe, can you say that it does not have a cause? There is not one example of any given thing. Forget about final cause. At every level, there is an effect which is attributed to cause. Two types of causes, material and maker. So you can't find one example. Even if you use your imagination, right? The wing of a human being. You have seen the bird flying with a wing, and you have seen a human being without it, and you combine the two, which is not within the collapsible possibility here. But you cannot have a situation where something comes from nothing. There is not one example in the universe. Then to construe that everything came from nothing logically doesn't hold. Similarly, when you have these flickers with reference to your own thoughts, right? If one flicker came and it totally disappeared, the second flicker will not know any continuity because it has ended, it is totally extinct, and a new flicker will have zero knowledge. It's a completely new, unrelated to the previous one. But that is not our experience. There is something which is continuous, which makes me see that there is a presence of a given thing. It has gone. This is what Surya was saying. Japa is a very important technique to see one thought arises, it goes, there is silence. The other thought arises, it goes, there is a continuity. What is continuing in thought and silence is the consciousness. It is invariable. It is not, we cannot construe consciousness as silence. Why? Because if consciousness is silence, then when the thought comes, what will happen? It has to go. It doesn't go. I am very much there to know the nature of my thought. And if I look at the thought itself, the content of that thought, the thought is like the pot. The thought with a given name and form, the content of which is consciousness. Okay. So that is Kshanika, both he negates the Shunyavada and Kshanika Vijnanavada. He says this is not possible. Everything comes from nothing, or everything is just nothing but a flicker, but there is no basis for these flickers to exist. That is not possible. Okay. So, many people say Buddhism and Hinduism say the same thing, but in here there is a big analysis and there is a difference, right? If Buddha did not say that, we don't know what he said. But if you think, the point is not that, oh, we are negating Buddhism or anything. If one thinks that the cause of the universe does not exist, things have just come, it is not logical. That is what we mean. Or if we think that if everything is just a flux and there is no basis behind all these flux, that is not true either. Because it can be logically contradicted. Okay. Now, the other idea that it wants to convey is, now you have come to the point that yes, Naris is Brahman, right? And the world has come about, and that in order for all these five elements to come about, and then to combine them together to make it into all these different forms, there is an intervening fact which is what we call all knowledge. Brahman, without undergoing any change, as though has become this all knowledge. Just like me, without undergoing any change, with reference to the dream world, I have become the creator or the cause of the dream world. And I have all the knowledge of how to manifest in form of all these different objects that I see in the universe. Okay. Now, what needs to be conveyed is that things are not just created like that. The mountains, the planets, the galaxies, they are not just created for no reason. Okay? So here, that idea is conveyed by Raso Vaisaha Rasagyam Heva Labdva Anandi Bhavati. Very important. The world is set up in a way that we have seen that there are five elements, each one is attributed one guna, one quality. So Akasha had a sound quality, Vayu had a touch quality, then you have Agni is Rupa, the form, water is taste, and Prithvi is Gandha, the smell. Okay. We have also seen that the sense organs that I think I am are nothing but combination of these 5 elements, and each one does a specific job. What is the job that it does? The ears pick up the sound. In fact, these 5 elements are the body is made up of 5 elements. The capacity of my senses is made up of these 5 elements. And that correspondence is shown with reference to what my sense organs can do. Okay. So the ears can hear, the skin can understand this sense of touch, eyes can see, tongue can taste, and nose can pick up the smell. But not only that, the corresponding objects are given which will enable my sense organs to work. So which are what we call sense objects. I have a capacity to hear, sounds are given. Right? And either I can just go with the very basic sound. Sometimes it's a noise and it irritates me. So that means there is a rasa there. It creates a certain sensation in me. It's not all just mechanical. You hear a sound which is extremely pleasing to you. So that means there is an object out there which is able to create a sound. And not only creates a sound, it gives you a certain mental framework. That is what we call rasa. Raso Vaisaha. It's all not just mechanical movement of the Jagat and you and just things are happening. All kinds of experiences are possibilities within this creation. There is rasa there. If you learn Bharatnatyam, once we had a very profound, very renowned scholar of Bharatnatyam, Padma Subramaniam. She came and she demonstrated through Bharatnatyam. She demonstrated all the rasas which are there in the human life. So all different emotions that exist, which are all possibilities. And how do they all come to manifest? By the sense organs engaging in sense objects. So you have instruments that we create which are able to produce sounds that my ears can hear. So there is a correspondence. So there is a meeting of sense organs with sense objects which then creates certain sensations in my mind. This is all the work of all knowledge. Okay. What pleases me again can be that music that we hear in the village. I'm sure it pleases them. That's why they play it day to night. For me, it is a great source of irritation. So that means Ishvara has designed the universe in a way that that person's punya is taken care of through this music because it pleases him. And your papa is taken care of with the same music. Because it displeases you, it disturbs you. Intrinsically, that music has neither the capacity of pleasing or displeasing. It is just a sound. But coming together of that sound with your own preferences creates different experiences for everyone. This is all work of all knowledge. Raso Vaisaha. I have eyes. I can capture many different forms. Okay. And that, what forms please me? Infinite possibilities. So there are corresponding sense objects which create a given sensation for me. For somebody, a sunrise is just one thing that you don't even look at. I'm totally indifferent to it. For somebody, like Surya was explaining in today's meditation, just a flying of a butterfly can please you because you look upon it as a wonder. Manifestation of creation, the colors, the beauty, what it can do, the wings, we can just okay. So you have eyes and you have forms, and what these forms do for you. You know, some people love to see this, what they call, what are they called? These movies which make you scared, horror movies, right? So you have these eyes, right? And then you create all these very weird images which are very scary, and what? Some people love it. Right? And some people hate it. It creates hatred, it can create joy, it can create fear, it creates all different kinds of things. Sense organs, sense objects, and all the range of things that are created. Each one unique depending upon your universe, what your preferences are. Ishvara, by showing you horror movies, makes punya collapse, papa collapse, fear collapse, everything collapse simultaneously. You have smells. Some people love perfume smell, right? And you have this aromatherapy, which is all to do with smells and how you can, you can get cured with reference to something that you have, with reference to just smelling something which is good. And some people, like our Swamiji, is highly allergic to perfumes. Anybody who comes near, right, and is putting a perfume, he immediately starts sneezing, right? And he says, especially when he goes abroad, and in Dubai and all these rich people come to him with full of perfumes, he says, I suffer so much, you cannot imagine. And each one is looking at, this one is wearing Chanel perfume and this one is wearing, each one is competing with the other as to what, and each one recognizes the smells, right? This is what we call sophistication. Again becomes a status symbol. Oh, that one is wearing that perfume. Okay? And it can be source of high discomfort for somebody else. Smell. How is our Punya Papa exhausted? Through sense organs meeting sense objects. And there is no intrinsic quality into any of that. It all depends upon your preferences. What kind of sensation it creates for you. This is all work of all knowledge. Raso Vaisaha. Okay? In order to get that rasa, okay, he says, Rasagam heva labdva anandi bhavati. The possibility of capturing certain ananda, some pleasures, through this engagement is also a possibility of all knowledge. So as I said, you can collapse your punya through this coming into contact of your sense organs with sense objects. And you can also collapse your papa, right, through coming in contact of the sense organs with sense objects. But our commitment is to Ananda, so he says that Ananda that it gives us is also within the possibility of all knowledge. Our preferences, our inclinations are also designed by the presence of all knowledge. How you are born with that preference and I am born with a different preference. All within all knowledge. Okay. One thing which is very important is, there is an analogy, how to show that how these rasas are created from something which never undergoes any change. There is the tradition uses one example. Okay? You have, this morning we were all talking about the movie, right? Yeah, Neerav yesterday watched a movie. Okay? So movie, if you go to a theatre, so there is this white screen, right? Then you have the person, if you, before used to have these theatres, and then there was this person sitting out there projecting. So what is happening? There are all these lights which are being projected on the white screen. What does it create? All these different images, right? And you look at those images and you get totally absorbed in those images. It makes you laugh, it makes you cry, it makes you sad, it makes you angry, it evokes all kinds of emotions in you. Okay? The white screen, which is the basis for all these different light rays to be projected, is never affected. Each light wave which creates that form is also totally free from the image that is created, which is giving you all these different sensations. Okay. And this is where it reminded me of Anne's painting, sand painting. Yesterday Prakash showed, there is a video of how she creates all these images. There are all these sand particles, right? And she's just using all these particles and she's just pouring it all, and amazing images appear. The particles themselves have not become the image at all. And then what is amazing is that she uses the same sand particles to take away, and then they all disappear, and on to that different images are created using the same sand. Incredible. There is nothing intrinsic about it. It is made up of particles, but it creates an image which seems very real. It can be taken away. Same thing can be used to create a totally different image. It's always free. Okay. This is what Upanishads talk about. It's not just the physical creation of universe and physical body, but it gives all these different sensations without undergoing any change at all.
And in that same example, it's not actually people seeing the sand itself, they are only seeing the light which is focused there. They are not even seeing this. It's only the image which is projected at it.
Yeah, so and that projection has got nothing to do with the sand. Yeah. So then he says, without that, so that all knowledge creates all the different experiences, raso vaisaha. It's not just a mechanical, physical universe that is created. Within that, all the possibilities of my experiences are created, right? Then, and these possibilities exist while I am alive. So here he says, without that presence of all knowledge, okay, who kaha pranyat, who will be alive? Even for me to capture all these experiences through my sense organs, in contact with sense objects, I have to be so-called alive. Even that system of my being alive, without the presence of all knowledge, how is it possible? The same body, when the prana goes, sense organs, the physical eye remain, the physical ear remains, the physical nose remains, but it loses the capacity to engage in the world of sense objects which are still there. So, when you talk about the Brahman becoming the Jagat, it's not ordinary at all. That all knowledge makes this whole Jagat and all the transactions and all the experiences and functions through which the experiences can be gained possibility, as a possibility. Okay? without this, who will exist and who will experience and who will breathe to operate the sense organs? Ko hyevanat ka pranyat yadesha akasha anando nasyat. If this all knowledge did not exist, esha hyeva nandayati. Okay? So only source of happiness, as I had said, that sense objects coming in contact with sense organs give different experiences, and there are experiences of pleasure. Where is the source? The source is neither the object, because the same object of sound can create pleasure for somebody and can irritate me. The source of happiness that we capture is neither in the sound, right, nor in us, because if the source was in me as an individual, I should always be happy in the presence and absence of sound. So there is only one source of happiness. Whenever I experience happiness, it is from that limitless nature of I, which takes away my sense of wanting when there is a presence of something that I like according to my preference. Then the happiness manifests uninterrupted by my own conditioning. Okay? And that is very much elaborated in the next section we will see later. Okay? So that means if you have now understood that there is only one reality which manifests in form of the whole Jagat, creates different objects with different capacities and creates those corresponding objects like individuals with given sense organs and mind, and corresponding objects through which I can gain experience and gain all these different sensations and emotions and understanding and everything. Okay? And if you miss that reality, how distorted your vision of the world is. Okay? So here he says, only when you recognize yada ha evaisha etasmin adrashye anatme anirupte anilayane abhayam pratishtham vidyate. Okay? So only when you come to know that reality, which is what? Unperceivable. Okay? Why is it unperceivable? Because it is not available for you to be known. Brahman is not available for you to be known as an object. Even all knowledge is not available for you to be known as an object. Both. Okay? What we have to bring in mind is the fact that when I go down, I go to two levels. One is the all knowledge, which makes every particle what it is, okay? And then the truth of that all knowledge. Everywhere simultaneously there is all knowledge and then the truth of all knowledge. At every level. What is the truth of that? When I look into this, then I said, okay, there is all knowledge which brings back the particles to make it into atoms. What is the truth of that all knowledge? All knowledge cannot exist without consciousness. Okay? When I look at my own intelligence, again I find the presence of both all knowledge and consciousness. How? I see that I have a thought which gives me the capacity to know certain things. Then I also know that there is an all knowledge which brings the neurons in a way that my mind has a capacity to see different things and to understand different things. So that's a different level of knowledge that is working, which is what we call all knowledge. So when there is a thought, there is the presence of all knowledge which makes that thought a possibility. Okay. And what is the truth of that all knowledge? No knowledge can take place without the presence of consciousness. So that consciousness is available to me how? As I am. So everything in the world that I see, when everything reduces to mithya, there are two levels. One is all knowledge, the other one is consciousness. And you see both, the presence of both. Table is, wood is, that is. And that is, which is totally free from any attributes, as though gains this increasing attributes through the work of what? All knowledge. So you see both. Okay. But it is not something which can be just arrived at through my perception and inference. So this is why it is unperceivable. It is unperceivable but it is knowable. Why is it unperceivable but still knowable? Because it is you. It is knowable as the nature of I and not as a nature of a given object in the universe. When you don't understand this whole methodology, people come to the conclusion, oh, it is not perceivable, so therefore you just have to experience. You have to go beyond the normal realm of experience where you perceive things. You project onto it something else if you have not exposed yourself to this teaching properly. What is wrong with that kind of a representation of what the reality is? Okay. Anything which you perceive, which is extraordinary in nature, is just a given experience in time and space. No reality can be captured about one given experience in time and space. What you want to understand is that which is the truth of every experience that ever existed, in the past, in the present, in the future. Ordinary, extraordinary, whatever that experience is. That reality which is always present in every experience, ordinary, extraordinary, that is you. And that you can arrive at only by looking into things and inquiring and solving the puzzle of the universe, which requires an inquiry. Okay. So that means unperceivable doesn't mean that you just have to not use your perception and then you have to go beyond and you have to have some kind of an extraordinary experience. It means that which is not available to you as a given object, but is available to you as self-evident I. But you don't recognize it because you have number of notions about what is that nature of that. So the pramana has to do the job of clearing all these wrong conclusions that you have, so that you begin to see what is the reality. I really like the Dustin who said that, sometimes it's fashionable, it's like just as science, like quantum jump and all, it has a certain meaning, then it gets used in healing, it gets used in all, there is a great danger of sometimes things which are extremely well analyzed, with a lot of rigor, are loosely used by people, right? And same thing happens in Vedanta. Each sentence that is made is coming from the depth of analysis which is unimaginable. Where you look at where you test that sentence against internal contradiction, you test it against different schools of thought, you test it against your own experiences. Only when it is uncontradicted by all of that, then there is some truth to it. You don't just declare, yeah, this is the truth and this is why it is. Nothing goes like that. But the same concepts can be used so loosely. There is a danger. And this is where there is an importance of having the right teacher and right methodology. So, here he says, unperceivable, bodiless, itself has no form, but it appears as though having many different forms. Okay? Can you attribute one form to all knowledge? No. Because if it is one form, it cannot be the other form. In order for it to be all forms, it has to be intrinsically be free from all forms. If it is intrinsically a human being, it cannot be an animal. If it is intrinsically an animal, it cannot be a reptile. In order to be a human, reptile, bird, insect, bacteria, all at the same time, like in your dream, you create everything at the same time. If you are only one in the dream, you cannot be everything else. You are free. And this is what we see at every level. The previous cause is independent, does not inhere the attribute of the next effect. The shirt can be small, the fabric is neither small or big. Already free. So this is what you use pramana and you see it, logic you use and see it, and you negate it all. Both. So this is where we say it is bodiless, it is inexpressible. Again, as we have said, it's not that, oh, it is inexpressible, so therefore we just sit here and just, wait for something to happen. No. Inexpressible, as we have very rigorously analyzed, it is not the direct meaning of any word. The word that we use are based on our language. The language is based on what we perceive. Okay? And so for every object that I perceive, I have a corresponding word for it. Okay? So every word is going to be limited. But I don't have any word for limitless because it is not available for my object, available as an object. But I have to convey, there is an idea of limitlessness, but I don't know how I can understand that limitlessness. Okay? So I have to use the word that I know, which are words with limited meaning, and I have to convey the limitlessness through them. So this is what we call, it is the lakshyartha and it is not vachyartha. It is the intended meaning where the teacher uses those words and very carefully removes the unintended meaning. So the meaning that is intended is understood by you. So therefore it says that it is inexpressible and unsupporting. Okay, so unsupporting, what does unsupporting mean? That on one hand you can say that if you take the Gita, okay, first he says, Maya tatam idam sarvam jagat avyaktamurtina. I pervade everything. But then he says, I am already free, there is no question of even my pervading anything, because from my own standpoint, there is no creation in the first place. The all knowledge remains just all knowledge. It doesn't become the world. And also the existence and consciousness, which is the truth of all knowledge and all capacity, is also just what it is. Only because it has not undergone any change, I can know this reality as it is. And that is the only knowledge in the universe which will not be partial, it will be total. Because this knowledge is not of a given thing, which I cannot ever know completely. But this is one undivided whole which has never undergone any change, which has never become anything, which is exactly as it is, and it is available in the same form now, in the same way now, not form, same way now. The existence which was before the manifestation is available to me now when I look into any given object and I can still arrive at that existence. The consciousness which was there before the manifestation is still available to me in the same way when I look into any given object and I come to this consciousness which is unchanging, which is never affected by anything. It is the only reality which can be known totally and totally unambiguously. Everything else, you ask the biggest physics and a physicist or a mathematician, his or her knowledge is just up to the point that, okay, they said, okay, till here, but after that we are still looking into it. That is the only thing which is available for a human being to be known totally and completely. So, unsupporting Brahman, okay. Anirukte alaniyanan abhayam pratishtam vindate. Now, when you understand that reality as it is, what is one of the benefits? He says, abhayam pratishtam vindate. There is no fear anymore. The fear is totally gone for this person who has understood. The one who establishes oneself or one who knows this Brahman, there is abhayam. So that abhayam, what time did we start?
9.
We will see in the next class. Fearlessness we will analyze because the next section is talking about abhayam. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.